Ever find yourself in a sticky situation and think, well, at least it can't get any worse? Now imagine you're at your own execution. Spoiler alert, it can definitely get worse. Today, we're diving into the delightfully dark world of executions gone wrong through history. We're not just talking about a simple trip on the way to the gallows. Oh no, we're talking full-on, whoops, did we do that? Levels of mishaps that make you wonder if the universe itself has a sick sense of humor. From heads that refuse to leave their bodies despite the guillotine's sharp persuasion, to hangings that turned into unplanned aerial acrobatics, and electric chairs that did everything but the one thing they were supposed to do. Yes, these are the stories that history classes tend to skip over, probably for good reason. But fear not, for we shall tread where textbooks fear to roll their wheels, exploring the bungles and fumbles of the executioner's craft through the ages. So, strap in, or maybe don't. That might just make things worse. And let's get into the morbidly fascinating world of executions gone awry. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that even in the face of certain death, fate sometimes has a twisted sense of irony. Axe to grind. Beheading, the go-to method for making a political statement or simply tidying up the royal lineage, has had its fair share of blunders. And when you mix human error with a hefty axe, the results can be, well, less than clean-cut. Take, for instance, the infamous case of Anne Boleyn in 1536. Now, Anne's story is a cocktail of palace intrigue, romance gone sour, and a dash of religious reformation. When Henry VIII grew tired of Anne, partly because she didn't give him a male heir and partly because he had a wandering eye, he decided it was time for her to lose her head, literally. But here's where history gives us a twist. Anne was spared the axe's blunder by being granted the mercy of a skilled French swordsman. It seems Henry wanted a clean break, both matrimonially and, well, you get the picture. It's like breaking up via text, but ensuring you use the most eloquent font. Fast forward a few years to 1541, and we have the tragic tale of Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury. Margaret, at the ripe age of 67, found herself on the wrong side of Henry's ever-fluctuating favor. Her execution was a horror show. The inexperienced executioner took several swings to complete the task, turning a solemn moment into a gruesome spectacle. It was as if the executioner thought he was chopping wood, forgetting there was a person, not a log, at the other end of his axe. Margaret's resilience, or perhaps the executioner's incompetence, left onlookers in shock and historians with a story that's as horrifying as it is morbidly fascinating. Jumping ahead to the tale of James Scott, Duke of Monmouth and the illegitimate son of Charles II, we find ourselves in 1685 amidst the Monmouth Rebellion. After his failed attempt to overthrow his uncle, King James II, Monmouth was sentenced to beheading. Legend has it that it took the executioner 5 attempts to complete the deed, with Monmouth reportedly begging him to finish his work after the initial botched attempts. The executioner, Jack Ketch, infamous for his lack of skill, turned Monmouth's final moments into a drawn-out nightmare. It was as if Ketch was trying to carve a Thanksgiving turkey without his glasses on. Crucifixion's unfinished business. Crucifixion, an ancient method of execution designed not just to kill but to humiliate, has a history that stretches back millennia. Yet, even in this most brutal of practices, there were moments when the intended outcome was not achieved, leading to tales of survival that defy belief and challenge the notion of finality in execution. In the annals of history, crucifixion stands out for its sheer cruelty. It was a method chosen by ancient empires not just for its lethality, but for the clear message it sent to onlookers. Defy the state, and this could be your fate. However, the process was not always as straightforward as intended, and there were rare instances where individuals survived, either by design or sheer happenstance. Moving on to the tale of Androcles, lived in the 2nd century. He was a figure shrouded in as much myth as mystery. The story goes that Androcles found himself on the wrong side of Roman law and was sentenced to crucifixion. However, nature had other plans. A sandstorm of biblical proportions allegedly swept through just in time, obscuring the view and allowing Androcles to be rescued by locals who were either incredibly brave or just really bad at following Roman orders. It's like the weather itself decided to play a game of not it with the Roman execution squad. Josephus, the Jewish historian who found himself in a sticky situation during the Jewish-Roman War around 67 AD, managed to turn a potential crucifixion into a career opportunity. Captured alongside fellow rebels, Josephus cleverly persuaded the Roman commander to spare their lives, arguing for a wait-and-see approach. His companions weren't so lucky, but Josephus's knack for negotiation, or perhaps his sheer audacity, saw him through. It's the ancient equivalent of talking your way out of a speeding ticket because you're a historian researching Roman road speeds. Fast forward to the medieval period, where crucifixion was less common but still employed as a form of capital punishment for the most heinous offenses. In these rare instances, documentation becomes even sparser, but folklore tells of individuals who, through a combination of luck, quick thinking, and the occasional lapse in guard duty, managed to escape the cross's shadow. Burned at the stake. Throughout history, burning at the stake was the medieval equivalent of a blockbuster horror movie, complete with live-action special effects aimed to scare the bejesus out of everyone. Unfortunately, the producers, aka executioners, sometimes botched the show, leading to episodes of prolonged suffering and awkward silences among the audience. In 1556, the execution of Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, took an unexpected turn. Tasked with being burned for heresy, Cranmer's execution was anything but straightforward. As the flames rose, they initially burned his lower body, prompting him to thrust his right hand into the fire, the same hand that had signed his recantations. Witnesses reported that Cranmer displayed a stoic acceptance of his fate, but the execution's prolonged nature highlighted the gruesome inefficiency of burning at the stake. Another notable case occurred in 1600 with the execution of Giordano Bruno, an Italian friar, philosopher, and mathematician in Rome. Bruno's heretical views led to his condemnation by the Roman Inquisition. However, the executioners underestimated the amount of wood needed for the pyre, resulting in a slow, smoldering fire that failed to consume the stake and the condemned man efficiently. The botched execution of such a prominent intellectual figure drew widespread attention and criticism, underscoring the barbarity of the method. Fast forward to 1727, and we encounter the tragic story of Janet Horne, the last person executed for witchcraft in the British Isles. Horne and her daughter were accused of witchcraft in a case filled with superstition and fear. The execution, carried out hastily in Dornoch, Scotland, was marred by a lack of preparation. The fire, intended to engulf Horne quickly, was poorly managed, leading to a distressingly prolonged execution that horrified even those who believed in the justice of the witch trials. In these historical bloopers, the intention was to ignite fear, but ended up sparking ridicule, proving that even in matters of life and death, execution is key. Pun intended. The hangman's blunder. In the annals of judicial execution, the method of hanging has been a mainstay, a seemingly straightforward affair of rope and gravity. Yet, as history would have it, even the simplest plans can unravel, quite literally, when least expected. Consider the curious case of John Babbacombe Lee, famously known as the man they couldn't hang. In 1885, Lee faced execution for the murder of his employer. However, the universe seemed to have other plans. Despite 3 attempts to send Lee to meet his maker, the trapdoor of the gallows stubbornly refused to open. Each time, it was as if someone had applied the world's strongest glue to the trapdoor. Or perhaps Lee had an invisible guardian angel with a penchant for carpentry. The authorities, perplexed and perhaps a bit spooked, decided to commute Lee's sentence to life imprisonment. Lee's story remains a bewildering footnote in the history of capital punishment, a testament to the unpredictability of life, death, and Victorian engineering. Across the Atlantic, the execution of Eva Dugan in 1930 turned the state of Arizona against hanging. Dugan, convicted of murder, met a fate that was as tragic as it was gruesome. In a horrifying mishap, the execution resulted in decapitation, an outcome that shocked the onlookers and prompted a swift reconsideration of execution methods by the state. Arizona's move to the gas chamber in the aftermath was a grim acknowledgement that when it comes to ending human life, there's no room for error or decapitation. The 17th century British executioner Jack Ketch is another figure whose name became synonymous with botched executions. His handling of the execution of Lord Russell in 1683 was particularly notable. Tasked with beheading Russell, Ketch's work was so poorly executed that it took multiple attempts to complete the deed, each more gruesome than the last. The crowd, expecting a swift and dignified end for the Lord, was left in shock and dismay. Ketch's infamy grew, his name becoming a byword for incompetence. It's ironic that in a profession where precision and finality are paramount, Ketch's legacy is one of failure and ineptitude. The guillotine's dull blade. The guillotine, introduced in the late 18th century, was heralded as the dawn of a more civilized era of capital punishment. Its design, characterized by cold efficiency and swift justice, was meant to embody the Enlightenment's rational spirit. Yet the device's history is marred by instances where it failed to deliver on its grim promise of a quick end, revealing the unsettling truth that even the most meticulously designed instruments of death are not immune to failure. In the fervor of the French Revolution, the guillotine became the state's preferred instrument of execution. Among its first victims was Charlotte Corday, executed in 1793 for the assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, a radical journalist and politician. Legend has it that the blade did not sever her neck cleanly on the first attempt, necessitating a second, more forceful drop. While some accounts may exaggerate the failure, the incident planted seeds of doubt about the guillotine's reliability. The case of Henri Longuy in 1905 provided a macabre footnote to the guillotine's legacy. After his execution for murder, Dr. Bourrieux, who was present, claimed to observe involuntary movements in Longueuil's decapitated head for several seconds. This observation sparked a morbid curiosity about consciousness after decapitation and raised ethical questions about the guillotine's supposed humanity. The incident underscored the unpredictable nature of death by guillotine, challenging the notion that it was a painless or dignified end. Eugen Weidmann's execution in 1939 marked a turning point in the public perception of the guillotine. Weidmann, a German criminal convicted of multiple murders, was the last person to be executed publicly by guillotine in France. Witnesses reported that the execution was botched, with the machine malfunctioning and prolonging Weidmann's suffering. The public outcry was immediate and intense, leading French authorities to decree that all future executions would be conducted in private. This event highlighted the inherent contradictions of the guillotine, a device designed for humane efficiency, yet capable of grotesque error. These episodes reveal the guillotine as a symbol of both the Enlightenment's ideals and its oversights. Its failures reflect the complexities of human attempts to regulate and sanitize the act of execution. Despite its design for equality and mercy, the guillotine's blade sometimes delivered outcomes as varied and unpredictable as the individuals it was meant to punish. Firing squad failures. When you hear firing squad, you might picture a lineup of soldiers, a blindfolded individual, and a last cigarette. It sounds straightforward enough, right? Aim, fire, done. But history, with its penchant for the unexpected, tells us that even this seemingly foolproof method had its moments of, let's say, misfire. The case of Willie Francis, 1946. Let's start with a bang, or rather, the lack thereof. Willie Francis, a young man in Louisiana, faced the firing squad and lived to tell the tale. For a year, at least. Due to a mishap with the equipment, the execution was botched, and Francis survived, only to be executed again successfully in 1947. It was a shocking reminder that even the most direct methods can have a circuit break, pun intended. The Great Escape Artist, 1916. Then there was the extraordinary case of Wenceslao Moguel in Mexico. After participating in the Mexican Revolution, Moguel was sentenced to face a firing squad without the courtesy of a trial. He was shot 9 times, including a final supposed coup de grace to the head. Miraculously, he survived, earning him the nickname El Fusilado, the executed one. He lived to the ripe old age of 85, a walking, talking testament to the unpredictability of firing squads, and perhaps a severe case of being hard-headed. The unfortunate mix-up, early 1900s. Picture this: a group of soldiers, tasked with executing a spy, lines up. The order is given, the guns blaze, but the spy just stands there, slightly confused, very much alive. It turns out, in a comedy of errors, the soldiers were given blanks, and the real bullets were with another squad, probably shooting at targets. The spy, bewildered but grateful, was given a second chance at life, while the soldiers were left scratching their heads in embarrassment. The double take, 1950s. In a less dramatic but equally botched attempt, a man facing execution was startled when the first round of shots merely grazed him, thanks to a miraculous miscalculation by the firing squad. In a panic, the squad reloaded, aiming to correct their mistake, only to find that their guns had jammed. It was an awkward few minutes of fumbling with firearms before the second, successful attempt was made, leaving onlookers in a state of morbid disbelief at the tragicomic scene unfolding before them. The electric chair, a shocking failure. The electric chair was introduced as a humane alternative to hanging, promising a quick and painless exit from the world. However, quick and painless turned out to be more of a guideline than a rule. The chair's debut and subsequent use were marred by technical difficulties that would make even a seasoned electrician's hair stand on end. Take the case of William Kemmler in 1890, the first person sentenced to die by electrocution. The event, more of a public experiment than an execution, was anything but smooth. The initial surge of electricity was insufficient, leaving Kemmler in a horrifying state between life and death. A second, more powerful charge was necessary to complete the execution, turning what was meant to be a demonstration of scientific progress into a spectacle of barbarity. It was as if someone tried to reboot a computer by smashing it with a hammer, effective, but hardly elegant. Fast forward to 1946, and we meet the unfortunate tale of Willie Francis. Due to a mishap in the setup of the electric chair, Francis survived his first encounter with gruesome Gertie, as the chair was nicknamed. It took a second execution a year later to carry out the sentence, raising ethical and legal debates that still resonate today. Francis's ordeal highlighted the grim reality that even with the best intentions, technology could fail in the most spectacularly cruel ways. Then there's the chilling story of Jesse Tafero in 1990, where malfunctioning equipment led to flames erupting from his head during execution. The incident prompted a re-evaluation of the electric chair as a method of capital punishment, underscoring the fine line between judicial sentencing and unintended torture. These episodes reveal the electric chair not as the pinnacle of humane execution methods, but as a chapter in the long history of humanity's struggle with the ethics and effectiveness of capital punishment. The chair, with its wires and switches, became a symbol of the paradox at the heart of the death penalty, the quest for a civilized method of enacting the ultimate punishment. The gas chamber glitch. In the annals of, well, that didn't go as planned, the gas chamber holds a particularly grim spot. Designed as a more humane method of execution, it was anything but for a few unfortunate souls whose final moments turned into a bewildering ordeal of survival against all odds. Jimmy Lee Gray, 1983, Mississippi. Jimmy's execution turned into a distressing spectacle when the execution chamber malfunctionally prolonged his suffering. Witnesses were spared the sight, but not the sounds, as officials hastily cleared the viewing room. It was a stark reminder that humane is a relative term in the realm of capital punishment. Cesar Fierro, 1987, Texas. Fierro's experience added another chapter to the book of what could possibly go wrong in executions. His time in the gas chamber was marked by evident distress and complications, leading many to question the efficacy and humanity of the method. It was a grim reminder that sometimes the past should stay in the past. Donald Eugene Harding, 1992, Arizona. The first to face Arizona's gas chamber in decades, Harding's execution was anything but swift. The 10.5 minutes it took for him to die were so visibly agonizing that it spurred officials to reconsider the method altogether. It's like deciding to switch to email after realizing carrier pigeons aren't the most efficient messengers. David Mason, 1993, California. Opting not to take the sedative offered to him, Mason's execution became a prolonged ordeal, raising ethical questions about the nature of witnessable punishment. The event underscored the gas chamber's inherent unpredictability, turning a procedure meant to be sanitized into a spectacle of suffering. Walter LeGrand, 1999, Arizona. LeGrand's execution was the last straw for Arizona's use of the gas chamber, as the drawn-out and distressing nature of his death led to public outcry and legal challenges. It was a case of technology failing to live up to its promise, prompting a shift in execution methods. Lethal injection, a chemical conundrum. Introduced as the humane alternative to the electric chair's shocking displays and the gallows' unpredictable drops, lethal injection was supposed to be the answer to the ethical quandaries surrounding capital punishment. Yet, as it turns out, mixing the perfect lethal cocktail requires more than a steady hand and a comprehensive understanding of pharmacology. It requires a contingency plan for when things go awry. In 2009, Rommel Broom's execution in Ohio presented another troubling case. Executioners attempted for over 2 hours to establish an intravenous line without success. Broom even tried to assist them in finding a suitable vein, an absurd collaboration under the grim circumstances. The execution was eventually called off, and Broom remained on death row, a rare instance where the condemned lived to tell the tale of their own botched execution. Consider the case from 2014, where an inmate in Oklahoma was subjected to an execution that went distressingly off-script. Due to a cocktail of untested drugs and procedural missteps, what was meant to be a swift and painless procedure turned into a 43-minute ordeal. It was as if the execution team had Googled how to perform lethal injection and clicked on the first link they found, only to realize too late that they should have scrolled a bit further down. Another case that brought significant attention to the issue was the execution of Joseph Wood in Arizona in 2014. Wood was injected with a combination of drugs that were supposed to quickly induce death. Instead, he gasped and struggled for nearly 2 hours before dying. The incident prompted a lawsuit and a national debate over the secrecy of drug protocols in lethal injections. These specific instances underscore the challenges and unpredictability associated with lethal injection. Despite being designed as a more humane alternative to previous execution methods, the reliance on drug protocols that vary from one state to another, coupled with occasional procedural mishaps, has led to outcomes that contradict the method's foundational promise.